Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this conference call. We will now begin Hyundai Motor Company's business result conference call for the fourth quarter of 2025. Once again, the presentation material can be downloaded from the Financial Supervisor Services electronic disclosure system at dart.fss.or.kr or the IR website at www.hyundai.com. Joining us are EVP Seung-jo Lee, Head of Planning and Finance Division, EVP Cha Yong-koo, Head of IR Division, Harry An, Head of Finance Accounting Subdivision, Michael Yoon, Head of IR Group, VP Young-suk Lee, Head of Planning and Finance Division of Hyundai Capital. We'll first have HMC's presentation on the business results, followed by Q&A session with the attending investors. Those who have questions are advised to press the star button followed by number 1 after presentation. Now we'll proceed with the presentation by Michael Yoon, Head of IR Group at HMC. Hello, this is Michael Yoon, Head of IR Group. Welcome everyone to Hyundai Motor Company 2025 Q4 Business Results Conference Call. On behalf of Hyundai Motor Company, I appreciate your time for joining today's call. And please refer to the presentation HMC 2025 Q4 Business Results on the IR website. The presentation includes quarterly key messages, sales performance, and profit analysis. And for quarterly summarized cash flow statement and detailed regional sales breakdowns, please refer to the appendix. First, Q4 key messages. Despite concerns over tariff impact and the resulting slowdown in demand, strong sales performance led to the highest fourth quarter revenue on record. Particularly in the U.S. market, we have achieved annual wholesale sales of 1 million units for the first time, driven by strong hybrid sales and a diversified SUV lineup. Finally, thanks to the robust hybrid sales in the U.S. market, the share of global hybrid sales recorded 16.3%. Next, the sales performance. In the fourth quarter of 2025, global wholesale sales recorded 1.03 million units, a decrease of 3.1% compared to the previous year. Retail sales recorded 1.07 million units, reflecting 0.2% decrease YOY. The annual wholesale decreased by 0.1% to 4.13 million units, while retail sales decreased by 1.6% to 4.1 million units. Next, I'll go over details about the increase or decrease in wholesale sales through key market summaries. In the U.S. market, sales increased 0.8% YOY, totaling 244,133 units. We continue to see strong sales performance of high-margin vehicles as hybrid sales accounted for a record high 22.6% of total sales, driven by new model effect of the Palisade Hybrid, and Genesis recorded the highest share of 8.9%. Sales of eco-friendly vehicles rose 29.2% YOY, reaching 70,503 units, driven by strong hybrid sales. In Europe, sales decreased 11.6%, totaling 138,152 units. Revised EV incentive in key countries like Italy and France led to EV wholesale sales increase of 54.1% compared to the previous year. As we continue to expand our key EV lineup such as Inster and IONIQ 9, our EV sales accounted for 18.4%. Sales of eco-friendly vehicles rose 12.1% YOY, reaching 62,078 units. In the domestic market, sales decreased by 6.3% YOY, totaling 177,496 units. Despite the reduced business days in the fourth quarter due to Chuseok holiday break, the new model effect of the Palisade, IONIQ 9, and Nexo led to a high proportion of SUV sales. Sales of eco-friendly vehicles reached 62,189 units, a 1% YOY increase. Despite intensified competition from rival hybrid model launches, the new model effect of hybrid drove hybrid sales to grow 8.9%, reaching the share of 29%. Next, will explain the sales analysis by vehicle type. Global SUV sales, including Genesis, totaled 638,149 units, accounting for 61.8% of total sales. Eco-friendly vehicle sales increased by 12.1% YOY, driven by hybrid sales growth in the U.S. market and expansion of EV sales in Europe. Despite the termination of EV subsidy programs in the U.S., EV sales rose 6.8% YOY, while hybrid sales continued to show strong momentum, growing 15.3% YOY. This concludes the discussion on sales, and now I will explain P&L. This page summarizes our income statement. Consolidated revenue increased by 0.5% YOY, 46.8 trillion won, and operating income decreased by 39.9% YOY to 1.7 trillion won. The automotive division's revenue increased by 2.4% YOY due to favorable FX environment and improved mix driven by hybrid and EV sales. The OP decreased by 49.7% YOY with tariff impact and increase in incentives. Revenue from finance division increased by 9.2% YOY due to interest rate cuts and FX fluctuations, while OP decreased by 2.7%. Net income decreased by 52.1% YOY to 1.2 trillion won. Next is quarterly revenue and operating income analysis. Revenue benefited from favorable FX rate, contributing 1.7 trillion won, while decreased global wholesales resulted in negative volume effect of 2 trillion won. Additionally, regional mix improvement and sales expansion of hybrid and EV contributed to 1.25 trillion won. Despite the decline in the financial segment, total revenue rose 0.5% YOY. Despite the record high fourth quarter revenue, unfavorable business conditions negatively impacted our profitability, including the tariff impact and higher incentives driven by intensified competition in key markets. Although contingency plan partially offset tariff impact, OP decreased by 39.9% YOY. Our Q4 cost of goods sold ratio recorded 83.3%, a 2.8 percentage point increase YOY. SG&A recorded 6.1 trillion won, which is a 1.9% decrease compared to last year due to decrease of sales warranty provisions owing to quarter-end exchange rate decrease. Finally, our net profit decreased by 52.1% to 1.2 trillion won. This concludes the presentation of the 2025 Q4 business results. Thank you. Next, EVP Seung-Jo Lee, the Head of Planning and Finance Division, will assess the company's business results in Q4 and the annual guidance. Good afternoon. This is EVP Seung-Jo Lee, Head of the Finance Division. I'll now present Hyundai Motor Company Q4 2025 business performance and Q4 dividend and shareholder return policies. First, revenue reached I'm going to share with you the performance of the fourth quarter and guidance status. Revenue reached 46.8 trillion won, marking a slight YOY increase, which was driven by an improved regional mix from increased North American exposure and higher EV and HV sales. Although a weaker won offered favorable FX effects, operating profit declined by 1.1 trillion won YOY to around 1.7 trillion won due to ongoing U.S. tariff impact, lower sales volume resulting from fewer working days, and increased incentives driven by intensifying regional competition. With the 15 tariff rate applied retroactively from November 1st, tariff costs declined by 360 billion won QOQ to 1.46 trillion won. However, the benefit of the tariff rate cuts were limited due to the sales of inventory subject to a 25% tariff in Q4. Nevertheless, the company actively executed contingency measures, mitigating the negative tariff impact by by around 60%. Additionally, shutdowns at European and Jeonju plants to accommodate new model launches led to an increase in fixed costs per unit, resulting in about 200 billion won. However, the sales momentum from upcoming new model launches is expected to enhance future business results. Next is 2025 guidance. This guidance was first announced at the fourth quarter 2024 earnings call, and this outlined wholesale of 4.17 million units, revenue growth of 3 to 4%, and OPM of 7 to 8%. However, following the unforeseen U.S. tariff issue, the guidance was revised at the 2025 CEO Investor Day, with the OPM target lowered by 1 percentage point to 6 to 7%. Despite an unfavorable external condition, we presented an upward revision of the revenue growth, which was raised by 2 percentage points to 5 to 6%, driven by aggressive and flexible production and sales strategies. Due to geopolitical challenges and intensified market competition, total sales reached 4.138 million units, falling short of the target by 36,000 units. However, we achieved a history milestone by surpassing 1 million wholesale units in the U.S. market for the first time, driven by growing global demand and our diversified lineup. Hybrid sales continued their strong momentum, rising about 28% YOY to 635,000 units, accounting for 15.3% of total sales. Despite the difficult environment as a result of our commitment to meeting the market communicated guidance with a higher sales mix in North America and strong performance in hybrid and EV models, revenue grew 6.3% YOY, reaching 186.3 trillion won, exceeding our revenue growth target. OP declined YOY due to about 4.1 trillion won in annual tariff impact, but the OP margin reached 6.2%, falling within the guidance range that we have provided. Next, I'd like to discuss our year-end dividend and shareholder return policy. To enhance dividend visibility and ensure the continuity of shareholder returns, even in periods of earnings volatility, the company introduced a minimum annual DPS of 10,000 won based on common share from 2024. Despite a 25% YOY decline in consolidated net income attributable to controlling shareholders in 2025, we remain committed to this pledge to our shareholders. Accordingly, we declared a year-end DPS of 2,500 won based on common share, thereby fully delivering the minimum annual DPS of 10,000 won. As a result, our dividend payout ratio exceeded 25%, reaching 27.7%. In addition, in line with the 3-year mid to long-term shareholder return policy announced in 2023, we completed the retirement of 1% treasury shares in April. To achieve our target of TSR ratio of at least 35% in 2025, and to execute the plan to repurchase up to 4 trillion won of treasury shares over 3 years, we plan to conduct a treasury share buyback amounting to 400.7 billion won. Of this amount, around 200.2 billion won will be included in the calculation of the 2025 TSR ratio. The remaining around 200.5 billion won corresponds to our previously announced policy of retiring 1% of treasury shares per year over 3 years, and is intended for the final 1% retirement schedule for 2026. As such, this portion will be reflected in the 2026 TSR calculation upon requirement. The treasury shares to be repurchased under this program are solely intended to enhance shareholder value and will be full retired during 2026. The share repurchase program will commence on January 30th and will be conducted over a 3-month period. This year, the automotive industry is expected to face a challenging environment marked by stagnant growth in key markets and intensifying competition, while continued investment remains necessary to secure leadership in the future technology amid rapid changes. Despite these challenges, we will actively implement implement continuous measures to reduce costs and optimize volume and profitability by region with the aim of delivering solid results and fulfilling our commitment to shareholder return policy. Finally, we'd like to express our sincere appreciation for your continued support and interest in our long-term investment and efforts in future business, including robotics, autonomous driving, and the hydrogen ecosystem. Going forward, we'll continue to strive for sustainable growth as a smart mobility solution provider and provide regular updates on matters of importance to our shareholders. Thank you for listening. I would like to present our 2026 annual guidance. Let me begin with our wholesale plan. Our sales target for 2026 has been set at 4.158 million units, representing an increase of around 20,000 units YOY. This target reflects our assessment of industry demand by region and segment, and please refer to page 2 for a detailed breakdown of regional sales targets. Turning to our consolidated financial outlook, we expect 2026 consolidated revenue to grow by around 1% to 2% YOY. Supported by continued ASP improvement, and this outlook is driven by increased sales volume in North America and further expansion of hybrid vehicle sales. And we expect that there will be no temporary cost increase in 2026. So with respect to profitability, despite a challenging external environment, based on our fundamentals and competitiveness and cost innovation, we are targeting a consolidated OPM of 6.3% to 7.3% for 2026. Moving on to our investment plan, total investment for 2026 is planned at 17.8 trillion won, representing a 23.2% increase compared to 2025 actuals of 14.5 trillion won. By category, R&D investment is planned at 7.4 trillion won, up 21% year-over-year, driven by efforts to strengthen the Genesis and eco-friendly vehicle lineup, including Genesis HEV. CapEx is planned at 9.0 trillion won, 32% increase YOY for U.S. localization related to investment in response to U.S. tariffs and for electrification to gain future growth momentum. Strategic investment is planned at 1.4 trillion won, representing a 7% decrease YOY. Regarding free cash flow, taking into account our profitability outlook and continued investment expansion in 2026, we expect free cash flow to be in the range of negative 1 trillion won to positive 0.5 trillion won. With respect to shareholder returns, in line with the value program announced on August 28, 2024, we intend to continue our shareholder return policy in 2026, targeting a shareholder return of at least 35% on a TSR basis. In closing, even amid heightened internal and external uncertainties in 2026, we remain committed to achieving our annual guidance through sustained profit generation and management activities that prioritize shareholder value grounded in strengthened product competitiveness and improved fundamentals. For further details, please refer to the 2026 guidance materials available on our website. This concludes our 2026 annual guidance presentation. Thank you. Next, Vice President Young-Seok Lee, the Head of Planning and Finance Division of Hyundai Capital, will assess the Q4 results for the finance business. Good afternoon. I am Young-Seok Lee, Head of Finance at Hyundai Capital. Let me now present the finance sector's Q4 2025 performance and 2026 outlook. In Q4, Hyundai Capital and Hyundai Capital America delivered solid results by continuously expanding their role as the group's captive finance companies. I'll now touch upon the detailed performance by company. First is Hyundai Capital. In Q4, under strengthened sales finance collaboration with the group by introducing specialized programs such as Genesis Finance, Hyundai Capital actively supported vehicle sales. As a a result, installment and lease volume increased by 14.7% and 10.1% respectively YOY. Total product assets grew 3.6%. Lease income rose on the back of expanding high-value model-based lease assets. However, due to declining market interest rates and regulatory impacts, installment and loan interest income decreased, leading to a slight YOY decline in operating revenue, excluding FX and derivative effects. On the funding side, 14% of domestic bond issuance in 2025 was ESG bonds. By expanding a foundation for lower cost funding with diverse borrowing offerings, such as offshore bonds and ABS, interest expense in Q4 decreased 2.7% YOY. In January this year, we were the first to issue public bonds in the amount of 500 unit euros as a credit finance company, further demonstrating strong global funding competitiveness. Despite continued downward pressure on soundness in the industry, driven by real estate stress in the regional areas and rising household debt and others, Hyundai Capital maintained solid performance through a high-quality captive portfolio and active NPL disposal, recording a delinquency rate of 0.82%. In spite of decline in lease costs, we rather increased provisioning for preemptive risk management. As a result, total operating expenses rose slightly YOY, driving a decline in operating profit in Q4. However, with equity method gains from overseas subsidiaries increasing, profit before tax rose 13.6%. In 2026, Hyundai Capital intends to strengthen liquidity to navigate heightened market volatility and defend profitability through funding cost management and OpEx optimization. The company will further enhance digital capabilities through data collaboration at the group level and adoption of AI in core operations. Globally, Hyundai Capital is preparing to launch its finance subsidiary in India and further advance capabilities across overseas subsidiaries to reinforce position as a leading global mobility finance provider. Next is Hyundai Capital America. Despite macro uncertainty in Q4, thanks to strong vehicle sales trends at the group level since the beginning of the year and a high 72% P rate, we recorded growing trend across the overall portfolio. In particular, prior to the RA subsidy expiration, the lease volume of eco-friendly vehicles increased rapidly, driving a 32.2% YOY rise in lease assets and a 16% growth in total product assets. On the back of robust asset growth, installment and lease income grew in Q4 YOY, keeping operating revenue at a similar level to last year. For funding, HCA issued a total of $11.9 billion in public bonds in 2025 and successfully debuted in the Euro bond market in June. Impacted by an increase in total borrowing, interest expense in Q4 rose 14.3% YOY. In terms of asset soundness, above 85% of the customers were rated prime, with those subprime rated recording less than 1%. Although the bad debt expense went up with the increased provisioning for residual value risk management. However, as total operating expenses declined slightly, OP in Q4 grew 48.4% YOY. In 2026, tariff impact, interest rate volatility, and inflation are expected to create a challenging environment. Nevertheless, HCA would like to maintain sufficient liquidity based on strong credit ratings to navigate this uncertainty. The company will continue supporting auto sale financing to sustain asset growth and secure outstanding financial soundness through disciplined risk management. Added to that, by diversifying business such as financing for the group's new businesses, the company will broaden its role as the HMG's global mobility finance company. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening. With that, we'll conclude the presentation and take your questions. Please limit your questions to 2.
지금부터 질의응답을 시작하겠습니다. 질문을 하실 분은 전화기 버튼의 별표와 1번을 누르시기 바랍니다. 질문을 취소하시려면 별표와 2번을 누르시면 됩니다.
Now Q&A session will begin. Please press star 1, that is star and 1, if you have any questions. Questions will be taken according to the order you have pressed the number star 1. For cancellation, please press star 2, that is star and 2 on your phone.
처음으로 질문해 주실 분은 다올투자증권의 유지웅 님입니다.
The first question will be provided by Ji-Won Yu from Dale Investment and Securities. Please go ahead with your question.
네, 안녕하세요. 저 다올투자증권의 유지웅 연구원입니다. 오늘 질문 기회 주셔서 감사드리고요. 두 가지 질문 드리도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 이제 비용에 대해서 대략 좀 말씀을 주셨었는데요. 아까 고정비 2천억 원 가량도 4분기에 발생한 것으로 말씀을 주셨는데, 사실 저희 4분기 실적을 보면 이제 관세 비용이 이제 1.5조 원 정도 발생을 했고, 이 규모는 사실 3분기 대비해서는 이미 내려오기 시작한 금액으로 보여집니다. 그런데 저희 4분기 영업이익은 3분기 대비해서 거의 1조 원 가깝게 하락을 한 상태이거든요. 그래서 사실 이제 고정비 말씀을 주셨지만 이제 기본적으로 관세 비용이 이제 줄어들기 시작을 했기 때문에 이익에 대한 이제 기대치가 조금 더 올라갈 수 있었던 상황이 아닐까 추정이 되거든요. 그래서 기타 비용들이 어떠한 비용들이 세부적으로 4분기에 발생을 했고 1분기에도 발생할 가능성들이 있는 것인지 그 부분들에 대해서 말씀 주시면 도움이 될 것 같고요. 그리고 두 번째로는 이제 저희 회사가 지난 CID 기준으로 5개년간 앞으로 총 투자 규모 77조 원 정도 발생할 것으로 말씀을 주셨습니다. 이제 역산하면 평균적으로 14조 원인데요. 올해 주신 수치는 17.8조 원입니다. 즉, 지난 4개월간 회사 입장에서는 이제 투자 규모를 급격하게 늘리기로 결정을 한 것이 아닌지 저희가 검토해 볼 부분인 것 같은데요. 혹시 지난 연말이나 올해 초에 2026년에 대해서 집행해야 할 최근에 결정된 투자건이 따로 있는 것인지 궁금합니다. 그냥 질문 드렸습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm Yu Ji-young from Dao Securities. So I have two questions regarding cost. First, you mentioned about the fixed cost for 4Q being close to 200 billion Korean won. And the tariff in Q4 was 1.5 trillion, which is lower than the amount for Q3. However, the operating profit for Q4 has gone down by 1 trillion versus Q3. So all in all, although the tariff cost has gone down, the expectations were high that the cost would also get better. So I was wondering if there were any other costs that ought to be occurred in Q4 for this result, or are there any other costs that are expected for Q1? My second question is based on the CID announcement. You said that you were planning for the 5 years, 77 trillion investment. So if you divide that on an annual average, that comes close to about 14 trillion 14 trillion. And this year you announced that the investment will be around 17.8 trillion. So for the past 4 months, have there been any drastic measures to make new investment decisions, or maybe end of last year or earlier this year, or for the year of 2026? Do you have any new investment decisions that's to be executed?
예, 먼저 질문에 답변 드리기 앞서 제가 연간 실적 발표를 할 때 자사주 매입액을 4,007억인데 4,700억으로 한 것 같아가지고 그 부분은 4,007억으로 일단 정정을 하겠습니다.
Before answering your question, I think during my presentation I made some numerical error. So the buyback of the treasury shares, I said it was 470 billion, but in fact it is going to be 400.7 billion.
네, 첫 번째 질문에 대해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 아까 전주 공장하고 터키 공장에서 신차 투입에 따라서 일시적으로 고정비가 늘어나서 그게 약 2천억 정도 된다고 말씀드렸는데, 그 외에 기타 비용 중에서 일시적으로 발생된 비용 등이 또 있느냐, 이렇게 좀 제가 이해를 했는데요. 그거 외에도 저희가 이제는 일시적인 통상임금 확대에 따른 등에 따른 인건비 저희가 연말에 반영한 금액이 있습니다. 그게 한 1,400억 정도 되고요. 그 다음에 캐피코 쪽에서 일시적인 품질 비용으로 한 1,000억 정도가 반영이 됐습니다. 일시적인 비용이고요. 그 다음에 부분에서 회계 기준을 감사하는 과정에서 저희가 이제 인센티브는 리스 같은 경우는 36개월 기준으로 저희가 했었는데, 그리고 근데 실제 리스 사용 평균 기간을 누적적으로 확인해 보니까 31개월 정도가 돼서 비용과 수익이 미스매치가 나서 그거를 한 번에 조정한 금액이 등이 한 1,300억 정도가 있습니다. 요거는 연말에 한 번에 조정된 비용이기 때문에 내년도부터는 발생이 안 됩니다.
Right. So to answer your first question, I mentioned that there's going to be an increase in fixed costs of about 200 billion due to new cars being input in Jeonju and Turkey plants, and you asked if there were any other costs due to that results in this increase in fixed costs. So there were temporary increase in fixed costs at the end of last year. We had to reflect the increase in labor cost, which came to about 140 billion, and also there was a quality cost that occurred for capital, which came to about 100 billion. So that was just our temporary cost that was a one-time happening for the end of the year. And also with HCA, during the auditing process of its fiscal orders, it was found that usually for lease cars, we set the time to 36 months for the incentives, but it was found that on average, the use of the lease was 31 months. So we were adjusting the cost and profit, and that was altogether reflected in the financial sheet. So that resulted in 130 billion at the end of the year.
예. 그리고 추가적으로 1분기 26년 1분기는 뭐 4분기 대비해서 나아질 부분이 있느냐, 비용이 뭐 좀 다시 계속해서 발생되는 거 아니냐 이렇게 말씀 주셨는데, 그거는 제가 설명을 드렸고, 그 외에도 1분기 실적 관련해서 조금 말씀을 드린다면, 저희가 이제 4분기에는 IRA가 폐지가 되면서 저희가 이제 딜러들의 전기차 재고가 조금 쌓이기 시작했습니다. 그래서 재고 부담을 좀 완화를 시켜야 될 것 같고, 여러 가지 딜러 재고가 좀 높아지는 것을 경계를 해서 딜러 재고를 최대한 줄이는 것으로 전략적으로 4분기에는 운영을 했습니다. 그래서 그거는 아마 1분기에 도움이 될, 4분기 대비해서는 나아질 영향이라 도움이 될 효과라고 생각합니다.
So I think I pretty much explained if any further costs were going to be created in Q1 of 2026 compared to Q4. But if I am to give you a bit more of elaboration on the performance regarding Q1, with IRA being abolished in Q4 last year, the EV inventory of our dealers is now piling up. So we are really trying to decrease this inventory amount, and that's why we have made a strategic approach so that we can lower the inventory in Q4, and we believe that this will help with our Q1 performance.
두 번째 질문에서 답변드리겠습니다. 지난 CI에 대해서 5개년 77조 원 투자 규모 대비해서 지금 평균으로 따지면 14조 원이라고 말씀하셨는데 14인데 지금 17.8조로 지금 말씀을 드렸습니다. 그래서 17.8조로 말씀드려서 뭐 특별한 그 이후에 추가되는 투자가 있느냐 이렇게 말씀 주셨는데 그런 부분은 없습니다. 저희가 투자비가 26, 27 요때 집중되다 보니까 이게 좀 그 26년도가 상당히 26, 27이 피크일 것으로 예상되고 있습니다. 그래서 그 효과 때문에 저희가 26년도가 높아 보이는 거지, 이게 좀 다른 투자나 뭐 대규모 투자가 그냥 CID 이후에 결정돼가지고 투자비 전체가 늘어나는 것은 아닙니다.
Now moving on to your second question, you said that during CID you announced a total 77 trillion investment for 5 years, and on an annual average it comes to 14 trillion. And this year we announced an investment of 17.8 trillion, and whether there is a new investment plan that is coming ahead. However, that is not the case. It's just that our investments are mostly focused on 2026 and 2027. So I think this year will probably the peak of our investment size. So overall, the total investment size or pie has not grown. It's still the same.
그리고 투자 관련해서 조금 더 덧붙여서 말씀드린다면 저희가 미래를 위한 투자에는 지속적으로 투자를 계속할 겁니다. 저희가 뭐 여러 가지 신사업에 4년 전부터 지속적인 투자를 해왔고 그 투자에 대한 미래 가치에 대한 어떤 주가 반영이 최근에야 이루어지고 있는 것으로 저희는 생각을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 미래에 대한 투자는 지속적으로 할 것이며 투자의 효율성을 높이기 위해서 각 투자별로 효과성을 검증해서 좀 우선순위를 정해서 그 안에서 투자 재원을 잘 배분하고 줄일 수 있는 기회. 그러니까 미래를 위한 투자를 줄이지 않겠습니다. 저희가 정상적으로 들어가는 투자에 대해서는 효과성을 철저히 검증해서 투자를 조금 더 미래를 위한 투자로 전환할 수 있는 그런 어떤 기회로 삼으려고 합니다.
And just to elaborate further regarding our investment, we will continue our investment for our future businesses. We have been doing this from 4 years ago, and I think most recently this value is now represented through our share prices. However, we are still trying to make sure that our investment is effective and efficient, and within that decision, we'll be making our priorities so that with the same high investment that we have, the same high budget that we have, we make the most effective and efficient investment. Overall, we will not be reducing our investment for our future.
네, 다음 질문 받겠습니다.
다음으로 질문해 주실 분은 삼성증권의 임은영 님입니다.
The following question will be presented by Yoon-young Lim from Samsung Securities. Please go ahead with your question.
예, 안녕하세요. 삼성증권 임은영입니다. 저도 두 가지 질문 드리고 싶은데, 관세 관련해서 이제 연간으로 놓고 보면 작년이 4.1조 관세 부담이 있었다고 말씀을 해주셨고, 그중에 한 60% 정도가 이제 여러 가지 절감 노력을 통해서 이제 세이브가 됐다고 말씀 주셨는데, 그러면 순 부담은 1조 2천, 1조 5천 이 정도로 저희가 봐도 되는지, 그리고 이제 올해 어쨌든 관세율이 15%로 내려갔잖아요. 그러면 올해 연간으로 저희가 어느 정도로 추정을 해야 될지, 그리고 올해도 역시 그런 관세 절감한 노력이 반영이 된다라고 봐도 될지 이제 설명 주시면 감사하겠고요. 두 번째는 이제 공시하신 이 자사주 매입 규모를 보니까 우선주 비중이 한 8% 정도 되는 것 같습니다. 8%, 9%. 그래서 원래 이제 주주환원 정책 발표를 하실 때 이제 보통주랑 우선주 계류율을 좀 줄이기 위해서 이제 우선주를 조금 사는 비중을 늘리겠다 이렇게 발표를 하셨었는데요. 지금 이제 보통주가 워낙에 많이 올라가지고 우선주가 못 따라가다 보니까 계류율이 오히려 더 벌어진 것 같거든요. 둘 다 많이 오르긴 했지만. 그래서 이 우선주를 조금 이제 비중을 높이지 않은 것 같은데, 저희가 보기에는 이제 비중이 내년이나 내후년 가면서 또 달라질 건지, 아니면은 지금 정도의 계류율이 적당하다라고 보시는 건지 말씀 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.
This is Eun-young Lim from Samsung Securities. I have two questions. My first question is related to tariffs. You've mentioned during your presentation that the annual tariff impact is estimated to be 4.1 trillion won in 2025, and you've said that the mitigation impact was around 60%. So if I interpret your presentation, the net burden coming from the tariff impact will be around 1.2 or 1.5 trillion won. So if the tariff rate is going down to 15%, how can we estimate or forecast the impact for the year 2026 coming from the tariff? And I'm wondering if you are going to continue to make contingency efforts to reduce the impact from tariffs. My second question is related to your shareholder return policy. As if I look at the plan that you announced through the disclosure for the purchase of treasury shares, we believe that the portion of preferred share will be around 8 to 9%. But if I remember your presentation, you said that during your presentation you are going to close the gap between the preferred stocks and the common stocks. So if you look at the current price trend of the common stocks, actually the price of the common stocks went up dramatically, so that widened the gap between preferred stock and common stocks. So I think the level of the preferred stock repurchase is not really enough. So I'm wondering, you're going to increase the portion of repurchase of the preferred stock in late next year or 2 years later?
네, 첫 번째 질문에 대해서 답변드리겠습니다. 올해 관세 효과가 4.1조라고 저희가 말씀드렸고, 26년도 관세 효과도 거의 비슷한 수준으로 저희는 예측을 하고 있습니다. 잘 아시다시피 작년도 관세 발효는 4월 3일부터 됐지만 실질적으로 저희가 재고를 갖고 있었던 기간 다 따지면은 5월 달부터 5월 중순 5월 이 정도부터 그 관세 효과가 이펙트가 있었다고 보입니다. 그래서 저희가 지금 그 사업계획을 짜면서 계산한 걸로 보면 올해하고 비슷한 수준의 관세 효과가 있을 것이고, 그 다음에 올해 한 60% 정도를 컨티뉴시 플랜으로 만회를 했다라고 말씀을 드렸는데, 내년도는 어떻게 될 것이냐. 내년도도 컨티뉴시 플랜은 계속 유지가 됩니다. 저희가 올해 줄인 예산, 줄인 비용 그 기준으로 내년도 사업계획을 짰기 때문에 내년도도 이게 그대로 캐리오버 된다고 보시면 될 것 같습니다.
If I answer your first question, we've explained that the impact from tariff was around 4.1 trillion, and what we are forecasting for the impact for this year, 2026, the level of the impact will be flattish similar. As you all know, the tariff took effect as of 3rd of April, but the tariff actually applied to the inventory from mid-May. So when we were calculating the tariff impact when we set up the business plan, we realized that the impact from tariff will be similar between 2025 and 2026. And we had the mitigation impact of 60%. So you asked about if the contingency plan will be continuing the next year. So I can say for sure that the mitigation plan for the tariff impact will be maintained in this year. And with the limited the budget and the cost that was reduced this year was applied to the establishment of business plan for 2026.
예, 두 번째 질문은 이제 그 자사주 매입에 관련해서 여쭤보시면서 주로 물어보신 게 이제 우선주하고 보통주하고 차이가 없는 것 같다. 괴리율이 더 벌어졌는데 그거에 대해서 향후에는 어떻게 지금 생각하시는지, 어떤 방향으로 갈 건지를 여쭤보신 것 같은데요. 저희가 그 자사주 매입하는 것 중에서 올해 TSR 35%를 맞추기 위해서 사겠다는 게 2,004억이고요. 나머지 그 1% 소각을 하기 위해서 0.2%의 보통주. 왜냐하면 우선주는 1% 이상을 갖고 있습니다. 그래서 보통주가 0.8%가 있기 때문에 0.2%를 사기 위해서 들어가는 자사주 매입 금액이 2,007억입니다. 근데 2,004억을 구성한 거를 보면 저희가 보통주는 0.16%를 사고 우선주는 주식수 기준으로 우선주는 0.2%를 사는 걸로 지금 공시를 했습니다. 그거는 약 25%, 비율적으로는 25%고 수량으로 보면 그렇게 크지 않지만 어떤 저희의 어떤 방향성에 대해서 이 수치에 담았다고 생각합니다. 그래서 앞으로도 그때 말씀 주신 것처럼 우선주하고 보통주하고의 괴리율이 좀 더 축소가 될 수 있도록 다각도로 고민을 해서 시장하고 커뮤니케이션 할 수 있도록 하겠습니다.
Your second question was related to our repurchase plan for the treasury stock. So you've mentioned that the gap between preferred stock and common stock is getting wider and wider. And you asked about if there will be any plan or direction that we can share with you in regard to how to close the gap between two different types of treasury stocks. So in order to meet the TSR ratio of 35%, we said that we are going to repurchase 200.4 billion won of treasury stocks, and we said we are going to retire around 1%. So for that to happen, we are going to spend around 200.7 billion won and 0.2% for the common stocks. So as we disclosed before, so when we dealing with 200.4 billion won, 0.16% will be composed of the common stock, whereas the preferred stock will account for 0.2%. That means if you translate that into the proportion, that preferred stock will account for 25%. Of course, the number of the purchases won't be really big, but you can understand from our plan that how we are going to proceed with our shareholder return policy. So in order to close the gap between preferred stock and common stock, we are going to give a lot of thoughts to it, and once ready, we're going to communicate more with the market.
네, 시간 관계상 마지막 질문 받도록 하겠습니다.
마지막으로 질문해 주실 분은 메리츠증권의 김준성 님입니다.
The last question will be presented by Jun-Sung Kim from Meritz Securities. Please go ahead with your question.
네, 안녕하세요. 질문 기회 주셔서 감사합니다. 저는 앞에서 관세 관련된 질문에 답변을 해주셔서 한 가지만 여쭤보겠습니다. 저희 회사의 기업 가치 변화에 가장 큰 변곡점을 만들었던 이벤트를 꼽아보자면 작년에 저희 회장님이 깐부치킨에서 GPU 5만 장 블랙을 계약을 하셨던 것 아닌가라고 저는 생각을 합니다. 작년 그 이후에 진행됐던 저희 현대차 인베스터 데이와 그리고 현대모비스 인베스터 데이 그리고 CES에서의 미디어 데이까지 저희의 공식적인 발표 내용들을 보면 스마트카의 완성 및 데모카의 배포 및 시승 행사가 늦어도 올해 가을에 진행이 될 걸로 저는 추정을 할 수 있는 것 같고요. 휴머노이드의 메타 플랜트 투입 또한 올해 이제 9월, 10월 정도에 시작될 걸로 예상이 됩니다. 그렇다면 이제 스마트카의 배포와 휴머노이드의 투입을 통해서 이동 데이터와 제어 데이터의 확보가 시작되는 건데 그 작년에 계약하셨던 블랙벨 5만 장의 설치 및 가동이 같은 시기에 시작되는지가 궁금합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I actually had a question about tariff. I think that was answered in the previous question, so I only have one question. I think the most significant event that HMC had done in terms of bringing change to our society and our value was the Gambu Chicken meeting last year and signing the contract in sourcing 50,000 units of GPU. And if you look at your presentations made during the CES Investor Day or the Mobis CID as well as the CES Media Day, you announced plans to distribute and also present smart cars as well as the demo cars as well. And based on my own prediction, we believe that this will be possible maybe by fall at the latest. And I think we also had a look at Atlas and maybe the input of humanoid in the method plans could be done by September and October. So to do that, you will have to start securing data for movement and control as well. So is it safe to think that the GPU installment and the actual operation will also be done at that time as well?
예. 저희가 CES 때도 발표했던 것처럼 휴머노이드의 메타플랜트의 뭐라 그럴까요? POC? 예, POC는 올해 연말부터 지금 진행이 될 예정이고요. 거기에다가 저희가 이제는 그다음에 이제 스마트카의 데모카인 그 모델이 26년도 중으로 아마 저희가 연구개발 지금 만들고 있는데, 네, 그게 이제 빠르면 하반기에 저희가 출시가 될 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그래서 그걸 프로젝트 코드로 저희가 지금 하고 있고, 그거는 소량의 모델을 만들어서 진행을 하는 걸로 돼 있기 때문에 지금 말씀 주신 사항처럼 올해 말이면 스마트카 데모카하고 휴머노이드 메타플랜트에 POC는 들어갈 것 같고요. GPU 5만 장 관련해서는 지금 저희가 일단은 5만 장을 구입하기로 얘기는 됐고 협의는 돼 있고 그거를 언제부터 어떻게 활용할지에 대해서는 지금 현재 구체적인 계획을 수립 중에 있습니다. 지금 말씀 주신 거하고 연관되면은 뭐 이런 것들이 들어가고 휴머노이드가 들어가면서 GPU가 사용될 가능성이 높기 때문에 뭐 올해 안에 될 수도 있겠지만 지금 시점에서는 명확한 계획은 아직 수립되어 있지 않습니다. 그런 계획이 구체적으로 수립이 되면 저희가 다시 소통할 수 있도록 하겠습니다.
Yes, so as we had mentioned during the CES, we are planning to conduct a POC for the humanoids in our meta plant at the end of this year. And also the demo cars for our smart cars, R&D is currently working on this and it is expected to be launched in the latter half of this year. And we already have made a project code for this and of course the demo car launch, there will be small number of models, but it will be launched by the end of the year. Regarding the contract for 50,000 units of GPU, we are currently working on the plan of when and how to use these chips. However, and it's probably likely that they may be used with the utilization of humanoids and smart cars as well, but we haven't come up with a concrete plan as of yet. So when that is done, we will communicate with the market regarding this.
네, 감사합니다. 이것으로 2025년 4분기 현대자동차 생산발표 3분기를 모두 마치겠습니다. 경청해 주셔서 감사합니다.
추후 궁금하신 사항은 현대자동차 IR실로 연락 바랍니다. 경청해 주셔서 대단히 감사합니다.
If you have any questions, please contact Hyundai Motor Company's IR Group. Thank you very much for your attention.